Hello, welcome back to the afternoon. We have 2 sessions remaining here. Before we resume the LA New Mobility Challenge, it's my pleasure to introduce CoMotion founder and chairman John Rossant for a fireside chat with Up Partners Ben Marcus, who we also recently had on Fast Forward, the CoMotion podcast. So if you don't get everything you want out of Ben, who has a lot to say, let me tell you, you can always go back and listen to that episode as well. So with that, John, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Is that live? Yes, it's live.
Hello.
Well, it's good to see everybody. Good to see you, Ben.
Likewise.
I don't know if you caught any of the discussions earlier today. Maybe not, because I think you arrived from a little bit late. But it was really, I have to say, and I guess I'm a little biased, it was a fascinating morning. I mean, just to hear from some really cool, cutting-edge, early-stage companies who are doing some amazing things in this sort of broad new mobility space. And this is one that you're very focused on. And I remember when I first came out to LA about 5 years ago with the team, and you were one of the guys I sort of looked up, and we had coffee at Shutters, I think, and we talked about the emerging kind of UAM space and drones. And you were very involved with your company at the time. And boy, have things moved on from then. And one of the reasons really we wanted to have you here today, this afternoon, is to talk about the funding side of things. Because so much of this innovation is driven by capital. You know, innovation and capital need to go together. Up Partners, of which you are a founding partner, for those who don't know, is based here in Santa Monica, which is not technically part of Los Angeles, but it is where I happen to live. It is adjacent, as you might say. And you have just closed on October 17th, I believe, last month, on a $230 million fund. So congratulations. That's really great news. And it's really a sign of the times. I mean, who would have thunk 5 years ago when we were having our coffee that in just a few short years that you guys would have closed on a $250 million fund? Who would have thought that a zero revenue startup like Rivian, based in Irvine, in Orange County, not very far from here, would have had their IPO last week? Since then, it has climbed. I just saw that it closed at about $170 a share, giving it a market cap of about $160 billion, which is much more than either Ford, GM, or just about any other. I think probably not more than Toyota, but it puts it up there as, I think, the third or fourth most valuable company in the world with zero revenue. So I think what I'm getting at, and this is sort of my first question as part of this discussion, is, you know, are valuations getting crazy? I mean, there is so much money out there that is moving into the space, which is great news for a lot of people, but it also gives other people sort of motion sickness. And, you know, sometimes things that go up can come down. And for you starting out investing, does it make it much more difficult?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And it's nice to see all of you here. Thanks for those of you who came from out of town. Thanks for coming to my hometown. Nice to see you. By show of hands, I'm really curious, how many of you are entrepreneurs in the room? Let's see. Looks like 30, 40%. I think that we're living in a really, really incredible time. We're living in a time where the velocity of ideas and technology that are coming to transportation is like we've never seen before. And the demand for progress in transportation is like we haven't seen in a long time. You've just seen out of COP26, for example, major commitments being made to decarbonize all forms of transportation. Very near and dear to my heart, of course, is, well, I'll share with you later, is aviation. And we're seeing incredible progress in decarbonizing aviation, for example, but sustainable fuels, coming to all modalities of transport, maritime shipping, road transport for diesel trucks, and so forth. We're seeing hydrogen making its way into consumer cars and heavy machinery, and soon boats and ships and aircraft. So we're seeing a mandate for decarbonization and sustainability in transportation. We're seeing a mandate for increased accessibility to transport to more communities than have had transport before, very rural places, underprivileged places, that when you give them access to transportation, you're giving them access to a global marketplace. You're inspiring people to develop new ideas, to develop new businesses, to increase their connectivity with the rest of the world, and to enhance their prosperity. So I think that these themes are coming together today with the velocity of entrepreneurship, of new technologies, and are really driving the valuations that you've seen. But in large part, I think in a justified way, because the opportunity is greater than we've ever seen. Now, as an investor, of course, we have to make sure that we're not just funding great ideas and great people, but also investing in things that are likely to generate a significant return. And so the price that we pay matters. And one of the things that we've found is that by building a community at Up Partners, we've built a community of entrepreneurs, co-investors, corporate strategics, technologists, academicians, policymakers over the last several years. And when we've brought these people together, it has advanced the future forward at a faster clip. It sort of de-risks or randomizes what is typically a more random activity of starting a company and making it successful. And so by taking that randomness out of the process for an entrepreneur, by forging customer and vendor relationships, go-to-market partnerships, technology partnerships within our community, we're able to make it a much better experience for the entrepreneurs, increase their chance of success. And therefore, we've been winning opportunities even at when we've offered a lower price than maybe another investor, and the entrepreneurs have chosen to do business with us and partner with us. So
it's kind of added value of a network that you bring to it, et cetera.
Yeah, it's real added value. I mean, I think a lot of venture investors will say we can add a lot of value beyond our capital. And having been an entrepreneur myself and raised quite a lot of venture capital myself, I know that that's occasionally true, but not usually. And in our particular case, because we are a sector-focused fund, because we are focused purely on the enabling technologies for multidimensional mobility, we are helping entrepreneurs transform the moving world. We think that because we have that sector focus, because we have that community of people that are experts in this, that are deeply engaged in this, that are driving large businesses, some of the biggest businesses in the world as our partners, this is helping in real tangible ways to create real success for these companies.
But talk to us a little bit about your philosophy and your focus, because I admit I was a little bit surprised when you guys started talking about that you are going to be focusing on the sort of enabling technologies around multidimensional mobility. I love the sound of that. I think it's really great. But knowing you well and your partner, Cyrus Siguri, I thought, obviously, they're going to be setting up a fund that focuses on advanced air mobility uniquely. So what led you to broaden that focus, if that's one way to put it?
Yeah, so just by way of background, my best friend Cyrus and I are about to turn 40, and we met when we were 10, so about 30 years ago. We met at the Santa Monica airport, both passionate about aviation, both learning to fly. We became flight instructors when we were 18 years old. We used to ditch high school at Santa Monica High School and go to the airport to teach people how to fly. Went on to go to college together, studied aeronautics at Purdue, then went and joined a startup aircraft manufacturer together out of college. Started our first company together in 2006, and have basically done everything together our whole lives. And yes, our passion is certainly aviation. We love to fly, but flying it's for us, it's not about just getting in the air and enjoying the view. It's actually about creating connections with people. And often I've been an airline passenger, and I've been exiting the airport near the baggage claim, and I see loved ones who haven't seen each other in years hugging, and it's such an emotional experience. There's so many emotional connections that happen at airports because of the magic of airplanes. And as I have sort of dedicated my life and career to helping bring the magic of flight to more and more people in their everyday lives, we've seen these very interesting examples where, for example, imagine a community in rural Congo. Congo, as an example, is a place that is rich with natural resources, has a great equatorial agricultural climate. It should be one of the more prosperous places on earth. And yet it's not, because they have really bad transportation infrastructure, because the people who create things can't trade them on the global marketplace. They're relegated to trading with their local neighbors. And just like cell phones leapfrogged landlines, we see that new modalities of transport, like advanced aerial mobility, have the potential to leapfrog poor road infrastructure and increase the quality of life for everybody. So is it aviation? Not really. It's how do we get people together more? How do we enhance their lives? And how do we do that in a more sustainable way, which I think alleviates another major existential threat to the world, which is climate change. So if we can alleviate climate change, and if we can help people connect with one another better, we think we'll be creating a better world. So the enabling technologies, for advancing aviation turn out to be the same sorts of enabling technologies that you need to advance other modalities of transport. It doesn't matter if you're flying or you're going over the ocean or you're going on a road. If you want to do that in better, faster, more sustainable ways, you need things like electrification. You need things like sensing and perception for autonomy. You need things like additive manufacturing to scale production of vehicles. You need things like connectivity and cybersecurity. So again, that's why we call it multidimensional mobility. These enabling technologies span across modalities of transport and ultimately help create this better future for people around the world.
No, multidimensional mobility. I love the term, and I may try to steal it. So I warn you. Okay, because one of the reasons I noticed that in your portfolio, for example, there's VIO, and we heard this morning from the founder, Candace Shea, who was absolutely brilliant. So what was your thinking there? I mean, that's a leap from advanced air mobility, electric scooters to be.
Yes. So Candace and her co-founder Edwin have an extraordinary vision for what they want to do to transform mobility with VIO. I think what you see today is electric scooters and e-bikes, and it's a start. But I think many years from now, you'll be amazed at what VIO has brought to the world. So we were inspired by them as founders. We invest in people first. We think that they are extraordinary human beings, great leaders, and are going to build a really extraordinary business. It didn't hurt that they also went to Purdue, like Cyrus and me.
Okay, got it. Let's talk a little bit about advanced air mobility. And you're invested in an eVTOL play in Vermont, and I'd love you to talk about that. Here, of course, every year at CoMotion, the role of UAM, AAM has gotten bigger. Today, next door, we have two amazing eVTOL planes right here, and first time in LA for either of those planes, from Whisk and from Volocopter. There again, I guess there are a lot of players in the eVTOL space, it seems to me, whether it's the Jobies, the Archer, Lilium, Volocopter. Is there space for all of them? And do you see a shakeout? How do you see this sector moving forward?
Yeah, we have a open source media resource. You're all welcome to check it out, transportup.com. And transportup.com tracks all the eVTOL projects that are underway, and we track more than 400 of them. So indeed, there are a lot of companies building some kind of electric vertical flying machine. My partner Cyrus likes to say that with road vehicles, with wheeled vehicles, you see all kinds of wheeled vehicles, right? You see wheelbarrows and bicycles and little trucks and big rigs and little cars and motorcycles. There's all kinds of wheeled vehicles out there, and there is room for all kinds of flying vehicles too. So I think it's important to, sort of categorize them in discrete buckets. So in each of those buckets, I think there will probably be 3 or 4 winners. There's not going to be 400 winners, but there will be a robust industry of these companies in the future, I think. as
Is the landscape comparable to, for example, the automobile industry in, maybe the beginning couple of decades of the 20th century, when you had the Studebakers, the Bugattis, just dozens and dozens of companies that some don't exist anymore, but most have been consolidated into sort of the GMs, the Fiats, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going to see?
I think so.
Yeah.
So we chose to invest in a company called Beta Technologies, which is based in Burlington, Vermont, as John said. And we're typically not investing in any sort of vehicle company. We're more interested in the enabling technologies, yeah, especially hardware. But this company was so compelling to us that we couldn't resist. So the company was founded by a gentleman named Kyle Clark, who's a really tremendous engineer and entrepreneur. Grew up in Burlington, Vermont, building home-built airplanes in his garage. Went to Harvard for engineering school. While at Harvard, took a year off to go play professional hockey for the Washington Capitals. So he's pretty badass. And he actually won the record for the most number of fights in the minor leagues of hockey. But, anyway, so Kyle built a couple of companies that were in the high voltage power electronics business. He was doing things like electrifying the Patriot missile system, getting them off of diesel fuel. He built the high voltage power electronics for grid tied energy storage systems, like what Tesla has in Puerto Rico and Australia and so forth. And he basically retired at a relatively young age, was living in Burlington, and was approached by a really inspirational woman named Martine Rothblatt, who founded SiriusXM Radio and more recently United Therapeutics. United Therapeutics has a mission to be able to deliver a transplantable human organ to anybody that needs an organ. So you don't need to wait on a transplant list. And so they have 5 parallel path programs going to create artificial human organs that will accomplish this mission. One of the things that Martine realized, though, was that she didn't want to ruin the planet doing good for people. And so she wanted to make sure that her organs could be transported from the manufacturing facility to the transplant centers in an ecologically friendly way. And so she has gone out and partnered with several eVTOL manufacturers to develop these aircraft. She's ordered them and will be putting them into service once they're certified to deliver organs for United Therapeutics. So Kyle happened to meet Martine in Burlington, and she said, I really want an eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Can you build one for me? And he said, yeah, I think I can do that. And she said, well, could you do it for $1 million? And he said, yeah, I think I can do that. So 10 months later, they had a flying electric vertical takeoff and landing airplane for $1 million. Kyle basically gathered up all of his engineer friends, and they basically worked for free for 10 months to build this thing. It flew about 200 times. Kyle was the test pilot. And she said, wow, that's amazing. Now, can you build one that can be certified and go into production? And he said, sure. So they've now built something called Aliyah, which is the first electric vertical aircraft that's able to fly 250 nautical miles. It was purpose-built for logistics missions, not for moving people necessarily. So United Therapeutics is a customer. UPS is now a customer. The U.S. Air Force is now a customer. And they're very focused on the logistics mission. They also have passenger transportation customers like Blade, but logistics was the first customer segment that they're going after. And we really agree with that. We think that it's going to be much easier to get into commercial service, moving packages than moving people, primarily because you don't have the same infrastructure requirements. If we want to set up a robust urban air mobility network in Los Angeles, for example, which I would love to see, it's been a dream my entire life, it's going to require a lot of consensus building and zoning and permitting and eventually construction of facilities. It's like a long time before this happens, and companies die when it takes a long time to do something. So by going after logistics first, you can operate in less urban areas. You can operate from warehouses that already have a lot of real estate attached to them, parking lots. You can even land on the roof of the warehouse, and you can make a major dent in the climate change problem by simplifying the logistics chain for these major logistics companies, reducing unnecessary distance that packages go by moving from a hub and spoke model to a point-to-point model, and doing it electric. So anyway, so we see that as a really great business approach. We love Kyle. He's coming at this problem not from an aircraft first perspective, but from a power electronics first perspective, which I think is the right way to think about the problem. He's building the infrastructure to recharge these vehicles. So sort of like the Tesla business model, you build the vehicles, you build the supercharging network. He's doing the same thing. They've in fact already installed the aircraft recharging network from Burlington, Vermont, all the way to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio for their Air Force customer. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so that's the one eVTOL company we've invested in.
Well, no, sounds good. And we were very happy at CoMotion to have Kyle speak in CoMotion Miami last year. So that we were delighted about that. I want to go back to you saying the range of the beta aircraft is 250 nautical miles. And that's sort of my next question, because it seems to me that the sort of emerging sweet spot in the AAM space is in fact that regional market. That that original vision of urban air mobility that was driven very much by Uber, the folks of the previous regime at Uber, I should say, where we have massive urban air mobility at scale. I mean, scores of thousands of flights over Los Angeles every day. We're not going to see that for a while. I mean, they're just the hurdles are too great, unfortunately. And I agree. I mean, it's been a dream of mine as well. But I think the regional piece is going to come into focus much earlier, much more sharply. And that, I think, is where some of the, that's the promise of eVTOLs. It's the 50 miles, 100 miles, 250 miles. Is that in line with your thinking as well?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I do think that urban air mobility, being able to fly here from Los Angeles, from Santa Monica to this venue rather than driving will happen eventually. And I think it will make cities a much better place. But yes, there are really significant challenges to getting there. So I don't think it'll be the first thing that these aircraft are used for. I agree with you. It'll be regional transportation. If at the end of a Friday, you want to go on a trip to Santa Barbara or something, right? Yeah. You can get there in 45 minutes in an eVTOL rather than a 3-hour drive fighting traffic. So I think that will be a likely first.
Yeah. And of course, in this country, unfortunately, we have not invested in rail to any significant, that will change somewhat with the infrastructure bill, but we will just simply never catch up to France or Germany or Japan or nations like that who have. And so in Europe, for example, the political authorities are now saying yet to regional air mobility because you must take the train. And making it sort of telling in Air France or Lufthansa. I think
the demographics, especially of the Western United States, if you go west of the Mississippi River, very different than Europe. Yeah. If you ever fly at night from New York to Los Angeles, as soon as you cross the Mississippi River, the ground is like basically black until you get to Los Angeles. There's like very few people that live between the West Coast and the Mississippi River. And that's very different than Europe, right? So the distances that we're talking about and the density of the populations that live in regional communities around the United States, I think, is not as well suited for something like high-speed rail.
California is getting to be a very dense state.
Maybe California, but yeah. I mean, I think more expansively, we have a lot of open territory in this country, and a lot of people. I mean, like, a lot of Americans live in rural communities. Right. So I think there's a big opportunity to serve them.
Yeah. Which is why, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I guess America will emerge, North America, I should say, will emerge as the big hub of advanced air mobility in the future. Do you see that? I don't see that the European market will develop in the same way.
Well, I think China is the other really interesting market.
Yeah.
So, in China, you have this state-owned enterprise, set up where the regulators, in a way, have an incentive to see commercial progress. It's different than what we have here, and so I think a lot of the, the sort of regulatory timelines that we have built into the way that things happen in the United States because of the Administrative Procedures Act and, federalism and all the other things that we really prize about the way our government works. China actually has an advantage when it comes to adopting and implementing new technologies. So you've seen a number of these electric vertical takeoff and landing development companies in China already, like EHang, for example, which has been operating in Guangzhou for quite some time. And I think they have an opportunity to really scale their operations. And there's a bunch of others. Another one that just launched called Autoflight X in China. So I think that China will give us a run for our money for sure.
Now, we don't have much time, but you mentioned earlier on hydrogen. And in the context of advanced air mobility and eVTOLs, to what extent do you see a role for hydrogen fuel cell propulsion systems for these kinds of aircraft going forward? And again, California, I think, has become a real kind of beating heart of that in some cases. But how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so I think hydrogen holds a lot of promise for decarbonizing some of aviation. I think short-range eVTOLs will likely be battery electric. Yeah. Hydrogen fuel cells have some real challenges with aviation, mostly because of thermal management. It's very hard to disperse the heat. And that's not a problem that you have for industrial hydrogen fuel cells on the ground. But in the air, you have drag. So if you need big heat exchangers to remove the heat from the fuel cells, that equals lots of drag on the aircraft, which means you need more power. And it's kind of this like spiraling, death spiral of engineering. So there's some real challenges with hydrogen fuel cells for aircraft. There are some technologies that are being developed that may solve the thermal management problem. But I think they're 5 to 10 years out probably. My guess is that we'll see hydrogen fuel cells on regional aircraft, sort of 250 nautical miles and less, the sort of regional aircraft that United and Alaska Airlines and those types of carriers operate today. And then I think for really long range aircraft that are flying coast to coast or across oceans, eventually they will run hydrogen, which will be zero carbon.
And Airbus has made a step forward and has, I think, designed 3 prototypes for 2030, hydrogen powered.
Exactly. But they won't be hydrogen fuel cells. They will combust hydrogen in jet engines.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, it's also zero carbon, but the fuel cells just are not going to be suitable for long range fast aircraft.
Right. Okay. As we come to a close, let's just sort of pitch this a little forward. And what are some of the newer technologies out there, newer fields in what you're looking at, multidimensional mobility and the enabling technologies around it that really are exciting you? You wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, happy to give you a couple of examples. One company that we are really proud to be partnered with is called Voyant Photonics. And Voyant.
Say it again.
Voyant Photonics.
Voyant Photonics.
Yeah. So Voyant Photonics uses a silicon photonics based chip and turns it into a LiDAR. So you may be familiar with Velodyne LiDARs and other things that you see on self-driving cars, these big things that go on the roof, spin around. They're extremely expensive, $100,000 plus. In some cases less now, but that's what they were until recently. What Voyant is able to do is put a LiDAR on a chip that fits on your fingertip, and it would probably cost less than $200. And so this can be used for any type of vehicle. It can be used in industrial robotics, can be used for security instead of using visual cameras. And that is making use of this fundamental technology called silicon photonics. Silicon photonics has been used for a long time for fiber optics, for the internet. But now we're seeing it on chips for things like sensing and perception. There's another company that we're not invested in that's using silicon photonics called Anello Photonics that is using this for inertial measurement units, IMUs. So, a 747 has a laser ring gyro on it that maybe costs $1 million, and it's not very, very accurate. Anello Photonics can do this for mere hundreds of dollars and much, much higher precision. So I think that's one really exciting thing to be paying attention to.
Good. Well, listen, Ben, fascinating. I think one of the best things also about Up Partners is that you're based here in Los Angeles. And I think it's another sign that, this city is really coming into its own as a true global hub of emerging mobility. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best luck for the fund going forward. And let's give Ben a big hand.